Chapter 15, Part 2 of It Happened in Egypt. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. It Happened in Egypt by Charles Norris Williamson and Alice Muriel Williamson. Chapter 15, The Desert Diary to Its Bitter End, Part 2. But what an encampment for the night! It makes up for everything, and a sudden realization of abounding health is tingling in our veins. We adore the desert. We want to spend our lives in it. Thank goodness we have 2 nights here on the golden shore of the blue Birket Karun, all that's left of Lake Moeris, of which Strabo and Herodotus raved. From the dune-sheltered plateau where our white tents cluster, the glitter of water in the desert is like a mirage, a mysterious, melancholy sheet of steel and silver turning to ruby in the sunset, with dark birds skimming over the clear surface. Suddenly the Bible seems as exciting as some wonderful novel. Not far from here ran Joseph's river, making the desert to blossom like the rose. In tents like ours, perhaps, Abraham rested with Sarah, planning how to save himself by giving her to the Egyptian king. To see this lake is like seeing a bright, living eye suddenly open in the face of a mummy, dead for 6,000 years. Our best sunset, romance but slightly damaged by an Arab waiter wrapping up his head in a towel with which he had just dried our teacups and no doubt will again. Another day, merely slavish to look it out in the calendar, and besides there is none. All I know is, we've had 2 on the shores of Birket Karun. I spell it a different way now, because no books ever spell anything in Egypt twice alike. The Lake of the Horns, and we've been on the water in some very old boats, in order to see things which may have existed once, but don't now, and at present we're encamped near Medinet al-Fayoum, a kind of Lesser Cairo, originally named Medinet al-Faris, City of Horsemen, because of a Roman equestrian statue found in the neighbouring mounds of Crocodilopolis. We have just arrived, hot and dusty, with more dust of more Fayoum than we had before Lake Moeris. Fayoum means country of the lake, it seems, and it really is a great emerald cup sunk below the level of the Nile, as if to dip up water for its roses. However, the Set is happy despite the state of its clothes and its hair. None of us quite realized what the Felisin were like before, or that the word Felal meant ploughman. This has been market day, and we met an endless stream of riding men, and walking women with black trailing garments. They had bought sheep, and goats, and rabbits, and quantities of rustling, pale green sugar cane, which they carried on their shoulders. There were wild adventures for the sand cart, and watery spaces across which Cleopatra was carried, at her own urgent request, by Anthony, Miss Hassett Bean by me and the strongest Arab. There were the wonderfully picturesque squalid mud towns of Senoris, and 2 or 3 others, honey yellow in a green mist of palms, against an indigo sky with streaks of sunshine like bright bayonets of djinns. And then Medinet, through which our caravan had to pass en route to camp, much to the ribald joy of smart, silk-robed Egyptian undergrads who strolled hand in hand along the broad streets near the university. They were big, fantastic houses to suit modern Oriental taste, painted pink and green, and set in shady gardens. And between high brick embankments we saw the river Joseph made, swiftly running, deep golden yellow like the Nile, with ancient water wheels pouring crystal jets into enormous troughs. This was our most fatiguing day, and we wanted our last encampment to be the best. We found the worst, a suburban meadow inhabited by goats and buffaloes. "Can't we move somewhere else?" Cleopatra besought Anthony, to whom she appeals when he's within appealing distance. "Isn't this tour for our pleasure, and can't we do what we like?" Anthony absolved the camp makers, explaining that we must be near the town in order to get carriages and see the sights we had come to see. Also, our water supply had given out, and we must beg some from the government people. He hinted that it would be well to make the best of things, but Cleopatra, with her royal memories, is not good at making the best of what she doesn't like. She wants what she wants, especially in her own Egypt, where things ought to know that they once belonged to her. Miss Hassett Bean is quite as exigeante in a different way, more biblical, less pagan. Her criticism on the encampment was that it, in all her oasis experiences, are destroying her faiths and hymns. By Cool Siloam's shady rill, for instance, used to be her favourite, but she doesn't believe now that Siloam ever had a rill. Later, 11 p.m. Felisin and Fellaha, doesn't sound female, but it is, pretended to have things to do on the frontier of their field and ours, as we were settling in, and stared unblinkingly at us, whenever we stuck a note outside a tent. Also they laughed. Also they brought their dogs. But they couldn't spoil the sunset, and Medinet was a colourful picture of the Orient, towering against the crimson west. I took Monny and Biddy into the town to see the bridge and dilapidated mosque of Kait Bey, with its pillars stolen from Arsinoe. Anthony took Cleopatra, and most of the other unmarried men took Rachel Guest. When Bridget remarked rather sharply upon the ex-schoolteacher's popularity, Monny laughed an odd, understanding little laugh. "I believe you think you know why they're all so mad about that girl," exclaimed Biddy. "Perhaps I do," smiled Miss Gilder. "What is her fascination?" "Bedr could have told you," Monny cryptically replied. "He told several people." "What do you mean, child? I'm eating my heart out to know." "Don't eat it, dearest. You can't eat your heart out and have it too, and it's your most important possession." "I wish you wouldn't tease me when I'm tired. Is it part of the secret you and Rachel were always giggling over, when we first got to Cairo?" "Yes, dear, it is, if you must know. But I don't want to tell even you what the secret is, please. You might think it your duty to spoil Rachel's fun, and she and I are both enjoying it so much." "Can you guess what she means, Duffer?" Biddy appealed to me. "You know I wrote you that Monny and Miss Guest had a secret. I thought afterward it might have been only their plan to see the hasheesh den, but since then I've realized it was something else." "Even if I could guess, ought I to give Miss Gilder away, when she has just told you she doesn't want you to know?" I asked innocently. They both turned on me in a flash. I expected that. "Do you guess?" "I don't see, if I do, why I shouldn't have my little secret," I mildly replied. I knew that, after this, Monny would give me a good deal of her society, even though she might not have forgiven me for bolting to haul down the cook ensign in the midst of her confidences. But the truth is, I have not guessed the secret. My wits go wheeling round it, like screaming swallows who see a crumb. I get a glimpse of the crumb, and lose it again. In my present mood I almost regret that Bedr and his supposed Germans have not dumped themselves down in our field. It would have been like them to do so, judging by the aggressive checks on those mustard tweeds, but as a matter of fact the party has disappeared from view since just before Birket Karun. They may have turned back to Cairo, they may have been swallowed up by palsied sand dune, they may have been eaten by jackals (we saw a dead one), or they may have taken to the flesh pots of a Greek hotel in Medinet, but the fact remains that, just when he might be useful, Bedr is not to be had. In our tent tonight, I took advantage of our friendship to try and draw Fenton out a little on the subject of his feelings. It seemed like the right hour to open the door of the soul. The fellaheen having taken their families home, our tent flaps were up, and only the stars looked in, stars swarming like fireflies in the blue cup of a hanging flower. But Anthony would speak of nothing more intimate than the mountain of the Golden Pyramid, or his tiresome Sheikh's tomb. I yearned to tell him of the contretemps about the hieroglyphic letter, but something stopped the confession on the end of my tongue, though perhaps in the circumstances I owed it to Mrs. East. If he had mentioned her name the story might have come out, but the one drop of Eastern blood which mingles with 100 of the West in Anthony's veins makes him singularly reserved, aggravatingly reticent where women are concerned. I used to think that this was because he was not interested in them. But something, I can't explain what, unless it's instinct, tells me that this is no longer the case. Another interest has come into his life, rivaling his soldier interest, and the secret hope buried deep in our mountain. I see it in his eyes. I hear it in the timbre of his voice. It means woman. But what woman? Is Monny right? Is he falling seriously in love for the first time in his strenuous life with Biddy, with whom he picked out for admiration the moment he set eyes on her? Or is it Monny himself? I must be a dog in the manger, because I don't like the idea of its being either. He is asleep on the other side of the tent as I write. Desert dogs do not disturb him. He's great on concentrating his mind, and when he goes to sleep he concentrates on that. I wish he'd talk in his sleep, but even in unconsciousness he is discreet as a statue. The last day. Evening. I am in disgrace, and I am left alone to bear it, so I may as well finish my desert diary. It's all on account of a lamb, just an ordinary modern lamb as you might meet anywhere. But I mustn't begin with that, though it haunts me. In spirit it's here in the tent, sitting at my feet, staring up into my face. Avaunt, lamb! Thy blood is not on my head. Go to those who deserve thee.